Hello, Jen with Convicted Hearts. And if you have a convicted heart, you're in the right place. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting here and chopping it up with the homie Josh from the Homie Hangout. And I just want to thank you for your time today. And I welcome you to the channel.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been a subscriber for a while and I'm a big fan of what you're doing. So it's a pleasure.
Likewise, likewise. For everyone that may not know, I'm sure most people know, but what does homie mean in your definition? Like, how have you used that name?
Sure. Good question. So I spell it HOMIE, and for me, it stands for helping others move in excellence. And so that's the nature of kind of the platform and the agenda with the Homie Hangout is to, help other people move in excellence. And at the same time, we're helping each other, right, to navigate situations. So it's, I've been in prison, I've been in juvenile hall, I've been in a SHU program, all that stuff. But I don't view it really as a prison channel. I do talk about some experiences in prison, and I will have people on that have been incarcerated from, different parts of the country and different parts of the state. But I also like to talk about other things that are relevant to those who have been incarcerated or who are incarcerated or who have a loved one that's incarcerated or are interested in dealing with the population that a lot of us come from, right? Regardless of specific towns and neighborhoods, right. but sort of the culture that comes from that. So we try to cover a wide range of things, not just prison, so to speak.
Right. That's actually one of the things that, drew me to your channel as well, is the things you talk about, and the advice you give. It's very much something that everyone can take something from it, and apply it to their own life, no matter the circumstances. So I really enjoy that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That's for me, that's the highest praise, right? That's
right.
And I don't have all the answers. I don't pretend to, right? If I could take a magic pill or wave a magic wand, of course I would, but it's just stuff I picked up. I've been home from prison for a long time. I've done a whole range of things since I've been out of prison. And so I try to take everything that's been poured into me from different places, including in prison, right. and sort of repackage that and help other people. And I get a lot of really good and valuable engagement from folks, right? Both public comments and private messages. And so that stuff is encouraging to me. I'm learning as well, so that's why it's a hangout, right? Is the idea is for it to be a community.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, it really does. So starting out, like, just to give everyone a little bit of background, a lot of people know your story, but if you can take some of the others back that might not, what happened in your life that ended up, landing you in prison, got you your term?
Sure. So I did only one term in prison. I did a lot of years as a juvenile. I never went to the youth authority. I went to various camps, programs, group homes, that sort of thing. And I'm from the Bay Area, California. And so at 19, I caught a case for attempted murder. I had shot somebody in the neck. I didn't necessarily have an issue with that guy. He had an issue with somebody else, that was connected to me. And then I wound up taking matters into my own hands. And so I went to prison. Classification-wise, I'm a Norteño, right, a Northerner. And so, yeah, I was 19 years old. That was in 1996. And so I went through prison, started out as a level 3, wound up going to a level 4, got pulled into the prison politics and was navigating that route, and got validated as a Northern Structure / Nuestra Raza prison gang member, and got sent to the SHU. And so I went to the Corcoran SHU, I went up to the Pelican Bay SHU, and that's where I paroled from in December of 2005.
You've been to some heavy places. Those are some serious prisons you mentioned.
Yeah.
It's such a, I try to think about what it's like, for someone being in the SHU and how isolating that must be. Can you just give us a little look, into what that was like and how you managed to keep your sanity, being in a place like that?
Sure. Well, and the keeping sanity is debatable, right? Depending on who you ask. But so both prisons, the Corcoran SHU in some ways is very different than the Pelican Bay SHU. You're still locked down roughly the same amount of time. In fact, in Corcoran, we were actually locked down more than we were in the Bay until they built the dog kennels on the yard that they would put us out on. But it was a little bit more open, right? Like bigger sections, so more people. And the Bay was, we used to use expressions like, man, you're put on the shelf. And you really are. And I saw people in there who I knew that were sharp. They were intelligent people. They were literate. They can hold a conversation. They were physically fit. They seemed mentally, physically, up to par. Yeah. And literally within a matter of a couple months, they're spreading feces on the wall and they can't speak a coherent sentence and they have no idea who they are, or they think they are somebody else. And so seeing that, albeit from a little bit of a distance, but it takes a toll on you, right? And you look and I'll admit at the time, there was a level of pride in being able to not have the shoe break you, and I think that's true in particular, both for Northerners and Southerners and those that fall in that general range. So kind of just raza in general, we read a lot. We try to keep our mind busy. Most of us we're very focused on our physical health and exercising, even though you never really come in physical contact with anyone. Mm-hmm. The notion of preparing for war, right? The notion of keeping yourself up to par. I think a lot of that, certainly there was some combat element to that, even though the odds of conflict in the time I was up there is really slim. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't allowed to have a cellie. I had gotten into an incident in Adseg in a prior prison where I had hurt a cellie. And so Corcoran, I got to have one. Pelican Bay was being a little bit more strict. Yeah. A lot of cellmates were getting killed. And so, but I think the other part of it was just to try to maintain, right? And so not so much external combat, but tools that guys that have been sitting there for 20 years had learned and developed to handle the internal combat, because it's not easy. And in some ways, it's the easiest time to do because the threat level is really low, because you have no movement. When you're in the general population and you're coming out to the yard, anything can happen. Right. When you're in the SHU program, you go to a little concrete yard by yourself. And mm-hmm. when you're out on the tier, nobody else is out there. And so, there's not really even room to get in verbal conflict with right. people. Everybody, proverbially speaking, right? Like hypothetically, right? Everybody's killers. Everybody's committed to whatever they're committed to. Everybody's willing to go the distance, and everybody understands that. So why get into the pettiness, right? Why get into the little nitpicking and gossiping and stuff? And so in all those ways, it's actually nicer and more secure. But there's something to be said for just the conditions around you. The sensory deprivation, which is by design, right? And so you have very little visual or even kind of auditory, stimulation, right? And you don't have any human contact. I remember I went to the hospital from Pelican Bay, and I had some medical issues prior, and so I was just going to the hospital, and they sent me to an outside hospital, and I said, I don't think it was outside. I think it was right there at the prison. But nonetheless, they sent me to a hospital. And the doctor reached out to shake my hand. And just, hi, nice to meet you. He's just a regular old doctor, right? And I'm, my foot is cuffed to the bed and I froze. I didn't know how to respond to somebody putting their hand out. It was as if I was in a foreign country and I didn't speak the language and I didn't know the customs. And so when somebody made a movement or made a gesture, I was lost on like thinking, what's the appropriate response, right?
Yes.
And not seeing nature, as cheesy as that may sound, it takes a toll on you, right? Not having any sunlight touch your skin. I didn't have the sun touch my skin for years. That's why guys come out of the shoe, no matter your racial or ethnic background, looking like a almost a yellow tint, right? Of just like almost transparent. You know, all my tattoos, I got a lot of tattoos, and they all look like they were drawn on with Sharpies. And you could see my veins, and I was physically fit.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, just you're sickly, but you don't see that in there. That's part of the trick, so to speak, right?
Mm.
It's the same way guys in the general population will get all kinds of tattoos on their face and their head because everybody else around you got a bunch of tattoos. Then you come home and you're like, oh shit, I kind of stand out a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
You fall into the culture that you're in, especially when you're in there for a while. So everybody's pale. Everybody looks like that. So that starts to appear to be normal. And it's not until you get out of that environment that you realize, man, the sun hitting my skin is a big deal. Physical touch with somebody is a big deal. You know, we'd put our finger through little holes in the door, and that was like a version of kind of shaking hands, right? And so it takes a toll. And towards the end of the time, I started, which I think is pretty common, but I started to see little tracers, right? Meaning like, you know, I'm looking at you. So let's say I was looking at my TV,
right,
and it would look like something was moving in the corner of my eye in the cell. And I would look, and you know, but it's like a rabbit or something. And I know there's not a rabbit in myself, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to kind of check yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And catch what's happening. That's just my mind playing tricks on me. And then you start to worry, at least for myself.
Yeah.
What's next? You know, like, uh-oh, am I heading down the path of that person I saw years ago that you know was doing a lot of really off the wall stuff? Is this the beginning of that? Right. How do I take control? And you know, you find ways to endure, and the shoe breaks some people, and it breaks a lot of people, and they get tired of it, and they will say what they gotta say and do what they gotta do to get out of there. Mm-hmm. And while I was incarcerated, I viewed those people as weak, right? Weak and disloyal and just flawed human beings. And you know, I never took that route. Most people I know didn't take that route, but now after being home for years, there's a part of me, because I'm not, you know, kind of pushing that agenda and my mind is not in that same tunnel. There's a part of me that's empathetic. That's like, man, you know what? Can't blame them. In some sense, maybe some of those guys were the smarter ones, you know? And I'm still proud of how I did my time. I can't necessarily picture myself making that decision should I ever be there again, which I don't anticipate. But I'm not so steadfast and hard cut and dry. You know, I used to think, man, you signed up for this. These are the consequences. You got to rock with it.
Yeah.
And, but it's torture, frankly. You know, the SU system, the SU program in California, which has changed radically since then. But in the time that I was in there, you know, that's before the hunger strikes. That's before the short corridor. That's before 90% of the reforms. Mm-hmm. When you were there forever unless you paroled or told. And it was designed to break people in the most fundamental, emotional, and mental ways. And that is by definition torture, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so
just the way you know, when you mentioned that, just got me for a minute. When you mentioned the doctor sticking his hand out, mm-hmm. I can't imagine being so deprived of human touch that, you know, it would take you a moment to realize, you know, it just, as a loved one of someone incarcerated, that really puts it in perspective, you know.
Yeah. He actually commented. He held his hand out there for a minute, and I just froze. You know, and thoughts are racing through my head, right? You know, is this a setup? What do I, you know,
Yeah, I
and
bet.
all kinds of ridiculous things that you don't think of when you're in society, right? And it goes, it's okay. It goes, man to man. Say,
Right.
what's your name? I, I went by a nickname for it. I went by Rascal the vast majority of my life.
Mm.
But suddenly it felt inappropriate to tell this doctor that my name is Rascal, right?
Yeah.
And but the only people that ask my name, that's the only response.
Right.
And the COs don't ask your name, right? They'll ask your CDC number. They'll ask what's your last two.
Yeah.
But they know your last name already.
Right.
And so you know, it's just the little stuff. And I mean, it's a whole other conversation, but I think that is part of the weakness in these programs that are designed to help people acclimate back to society. Mm-hmm. Is folks jump way too many steps ahead, right? We need to get you a job. Oh, hold on, man. You
right.
know, I've never had a job. The idea of filling out a resume is intimidating because what am I going to say? Right. I ran the yard in Salinas Valley and I whacked some people and, you know, I'm a prison gang member. Like what?
Yeah. Where do you start? Yeah.
And so, and we're not ready. Most of us are not ready for that level of public engagement.
Right.
It's a deprogramming. It's like a literal deprogramming that you have to go through. And some get farther than others, and community support and family support and all that stuff makes a world of difference.
Right. Yeah. That's the next, you know, that really makes sense. The next thought I had was, how much does family support play into someone being able to successfully, you know, serve their time and make it on the outside?
Sure. I think I like how you phrase that, because I think it's sort of two different things. So having family support while you're in there, of course, is valuable, right? Whether it's letters or visits, or people put some money on your books or send you some pictures. For myself, I had some of that, but I was real focused on doing my time. And I was consumed by the world I was living in. So I didn't have a ton of interest in what was going on outside those walls. And so it's hard to say because I had it. And so it's hard to say, well, I didn't really need it because I wasn't in the position, right? I mean, I lost a lot of people, and the vast majority of people I knew, you know, fell off if they ever got in to begin with. But I had some family that came through, right? My sisters and my mom. And so I certainly enjoyed it. I enjoyed the break of the visiting room, but I wasn't the guy that would spend all day in the visiting room with my family. You know, it's in particular when I was in a prison that was close to them. I'd go out there for a couple of hours and, you know, it's time to go back to the yard, right? And so, but not everybody does their time that way. And I'm not saying the way I did it was right by any stretch. Just that sort of was it for me. But the coming home part, it was literally life-saving. For me, it was life-saving to have, again, not many, right? I didn't need an army of people.
Mm-hmm.
I needed just one or two, you know, and I had a couple more than that, but I needed just a few folks to, I think the way I put it in one of my videos, I did a video about kind of adjusting the first 48 hours that I was home. And so there's some stories in there of specific situations, but the gist of it is I had folks who would remind me of the person I said I wanted to be before I walked home, right? Before I got out. And which wasn't even a concept I entertained until a year or less to my parole date. And so then I came home and I hit walls and I struggled and I stumbled and I had support, right? I paroled on a Friday. My parole officer came and picked me up. and I was working with my uncle on Monday. And so, you know, threw a couple bucks in my pocket, but it was keeping me busy. It gave me something to do. It made me feel like I was of value somehow, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it showed me how much had changed around me, right? We're driving through San Francisco and other places, and it's a whole new world, you know? And so, but I didn't have to do it by myself. And
Right.
so that stuff was helpful. But in the little stuff I was talking about, looking at a menu, trying to figure out what to order, trying to slow your mind down instead of over analyzing every movement and every person around you. And what are they wearing? Oh, they got tattoos. What are those tattoos? How are they carrying themselves? Where are they going? Why does it seem like they're going in circles? Why did they go in that store? They just came out of that store. Why? You know, and trying to fit together pieces of a puzzle, but I'm only used to playing that game over here.
Right.
And they're not that compatible. And so that stuff, the emotional and the mental stuff, having people that didn't judge me, that didn't make fun of me or scold me or do the whole, hey man, you just got to get over it, right?
Yes.
And you've been home 6 months, why are you still that way? I didn't have to endure that. I endured that from some people, but those people weren't particularly meaningful to me.
Right.
The ones that I valued didn't do that. And they knew that balance between holding my hand, so like infantilizing me, right? Or you know, treat me like a child, because I don't want that. But also don't just set me loose to go do my own thing. Like I'm not ready for that either. Right. And so it's a balancing act in between. And it wasn't one that I could direct them in. You know, I couldn't tell them, this is how you balance out to help me.
Yeah.
I'm all over the place. I'm just trying to figure out life. I don't necessarily know what I need from moment to moment. I don't know. I'm just kind of shooting from the hip, right? And so having them care enough and be attentive enough and experiment and see what worked and what didn't to help level me out. There is zero chance, zero. And I've never gone back to prison, right? I've been out 16 years. There is zero chance that I even make it 6 months without that. And not everybody has that, obviously. And not everybody has those relatives. And not everybody's relatives, as well-intentioned and as loving as they are, not everybody could strike that balance, right? Incarceration runs in my family back as long as I know, right? My great-grandfather, my grandfather, like I can't trace my family line far enough back to find somebody that was not in prison in the state of California or the federal system. So my family knows how to rock with this, right? For better or worse. But if you don't have that, my encouragement and what the space I've tried to provide in other areas of life, find a community of people that are a little further down the road than you are. You know, when you first come home, man, find some folks that have been out 6-8 months and they're handling their business. They're not reckless. They're not running the streets. They're not trying to act like they were before they went to the joint. You know, they're kind of figuring it out. And they may not have all the answers, quote unquote, but they're doing better than you, right? Because they've been out 8 months and you've been out 8 days. So you have something to learn from them. And I think society and our communities are becoming a little bit better, particularly our communities are becoming better at recognizing that we need to do that. And formerly incarcerated people need to step up to the plate and do that, right? And be there for one another and not play the prison politics and not, oh man, I can't help you because you're from down south, right? Or I can't because, come on, man, we ain't in prison no more, homie.
Right. Like, you know? That gets you nowhere. Yeah.
Right. Like it's, and I think more and more folks are starting to do that. And that's where the healing comes from. You know, there's a saying from friends of mine in San Francisco have, they work with this organization called United Players. And they said it takes the hood to save the hood. And that's true on a lot of levels. And
Most
and it's
definitely.
also true on what we're speaking about. You
Right.
know, we got to be at the front of that conversations. Folks like you that have a loved one incarcerated, like you need to be at the front of those conversations. And not everybody wants a spotlight or a microphone. You know, there's a role for everybody to play. And maybe
Sure.
your circle of influence is just your family,
Hmm.
right? Maybe it's the whole country, who knows? But we got to do that because ain't nobody going to do it for us and they ain't going to do it the way that we need,
Right.
you know?
That's the truth. Yeah, that it's really true. And this is where, I find a lot of my encouragement, to push forward and be there for my loved one. And it makes my heart feel good to help others,
Mm-hmm.
that reach out to us. I'm sure you get a lot of people reaching out to you on a private, side,
Yeah.
asking for advice and things. And you have a wealth of knowledge. So, this is an important thing that we're doing, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I think another thing that is maybe coming to light more in life and society is people are starting to recognize mental health and the
Yeah.
importance of recognizing different things like PTSD,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. I would imagine that, going through what you went through can leave maybe some long-term effects, being deprived of things like that, inside.
Yeah, I don't so clinically I'm bipolar, right? I take psych meds every day. And as another indicator that I don't have it all figured out, right? Like maybe 3 years ago, I was 5150. They changed my diagnosis. And I was a student at UC Berkeley, and I was doing my thing, right? And
Yeah.
and they said, "Oh, we think you have ADD." And prior to that, I had like explosive disorder. So, there's all kinds of terms, but so they changed my meds. And, a lot of times when we're going crazy, we're the last ones to know, right? Everybody else sees it before
I
we do.
agree. Yeah.
And so I I took a nosedive, and I had a lot of other stuff going off, going on in my life, and so I wound up getting 5150. Then I got 5250 because I'm an overachiever. So why stop at 51 if you could do
Right.
52?
Yeah.
And I was trying to play the system. I was like, you can only hold me 72 hours. So I'm going to sit in the corner with my mouth shut for 3 days and then you got to let me loose.
Right.
They're like, yeah, actually, we don't. We can, we can detain you longer. And I'm in this mental hospital. And so, they changed my medication. They switched me to the bipolar stuff. And that's really made a difference.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that everybody coming out of prison is bipolar by any stretch. And it runs in my family for generations. Which is interesting because that runs in my family, as does incarceration. So there's some correlation there probably. But
right.
I mean, I think everybody that's done, at minimum, that's done a good chunk of time at once. And probably everybody to some degree, but especially if you've done a minute.
Right.
Especially if you've spent considerable time at ADSEG or the SUE program. Of course you have PTSD, right?
Of course. Yeah.
That's not unusual. It would be unusual if you didn't. It would be weird, quote unquote, if you didn't, right? Because our minds and our bodies, our minds and our bodies care about survival, right?
Yeah.
And they're both, connected deeply, right? In terms of your mental health impacts your physical health and your physical health impacts your mental health. And you can't separate the two, right? And that's backed by a ton of research and there's a million examples, but it's going to always want to survive. So it's going to adjust. They say that within 72 hours of solitary confinement, your brain starts to rewire itself, right? Which doesn't mean you go crazy, quote unquote, but your brain realizes, hey, we're in a very different space than we have been before. Mm-hmm. So we're going to make some adjustments to make this space manageable, and which it's not always successful. Sometimes manageable is like that other guy I described, right? But so that's normal. And I think we need to normalize it. There's another guy that probably a lot of people know. and I've talked to him a little bit. We're gonna do some stuff together. But incredible Javier, right, has a channel, and he speaks a lot about mental health, and I try to get into it too, and I appreciate it. Everybody that talks about it, right, and I know you talk about it, and we need to destigmatize it, right, because
Agree.
we are not unusual, right?
Right.
Normal and abnormal is all kind of a circumstantial thing anyways, right? Like,
Right.
and so of course people in the hood don't behave the way that people in, financially wealthy, neighborhoods do.
Sure.
But our environment is not the same, right? And so what we do is generally pretty normal for where we are. And what they do is normal for where they are. You can't compare us though. It's apples and oranges. And that's, I think, where we need to get to with mental health, right? Is, am I a little off compared to somebody that, compared to a lot of people that went to UC Berkeley? Sure. But my route there was a hell of a lot different than theirs. And so, coming in as a 40-year-old ex-convict that never graduated the 7th grade in a traditional school system versus a 20-year-old trust fund kid whose parents are alumni and they grew up running around that campus. Yeah, I'm unusual compared to them.
Right.
But that doesn't make me inferior. That doesn't make me less than them. And if anything, I got some advantages, right? Because I've lived a little bit of life.
Oh yeah.
And so I think we need a mentality shift in how we view our own struggles and how we view the path out,
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. And that's, I feel like we, even talking right now, we're doing that, it's important. Yeah, most definitely. Communicating and making it a normal thing to talk about. And when you, bring these things up and talk about it and let people know, you don't need to feel ashamed or, like you have to keep it, a secret that you're feeling some kind of way or going through something. Reach out, talk to someone. Yeah. I was watching one of your videos last night, actually, and I didn't realize that you had lost a sibling to gun violence. And I was just wondering, my condolences, first of all, and how do you walk with that daily and sort of get through that? Is it something that you try to keep in the back of your mind, and or what's it like for you? I've been through something similar, losing someone tragically, so I'm just curious how you deal with it.
Sure. I mean, at the time I was floored, right? And so my brother's name is Roy. His nickname was Speedy. And long story short, man, he wasn't from the neighborhood in a gang sense. He was with the business, but not in the stereotypical sense. Incredible athlete, right, in football and in baseball in particular. And I mean, I was my best friend, right? Like, that's my guy. And he moved out of the area and in high school, and he was never one to turn down a fight, right? It's the teenage kind of machismo stuff, right? And I mean, he had hands, right? Like, his hands were legendary to a degree, right? And so, but not in this new place he went to,
Right. Yeah.
And so he gets into a fight. He beats the brakes off of some big shot, in front of the school. And that guy took his L, took his loss. But there was somebody that always wanted to be a part of that little clique. And so he stole his dad's gun and shot my brother, set him up, a female set him up, and shot my brother. And he was dead when he got back into the car. It was just adrenaline pumping. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's other details there, but so at that time, that was June of 95. I wound up going to prison or going to jail on this attempted murder in October of 96. And so, unrelated, my conflict and his, but it was devastating, man. It was devastating for everybody. And, you know, I had a lot of homeboys and I had a lot of, you know, people all over the Bay Area, right? But our relationship was different and it wasn't built around that. Like that, it was a pure connection, right? There was no obligation, you know, and so it hurt, man. I've off the top of my head, I could think of a good 30 people that have passed prematurely, right? At their own hand or overdose or car wrecks or high speeds, you know, killed by the cops, killed by other people. To this day, nothing hurts like his loss. I guess in terms of like an encouragement, if it, you know, I don't know if that's the right term, but what I realized is a couple things. One, more often, I'd still think about him every day. Maybe once in a while, it'll consciously skip my mind, but not ever for more than a day.
Right.
And so, but now when I think of him, more often than not, I smile then cry. And that was not the case for 20 years, right? And there's no time limit on grief, right? And so, but I tell people, you know, that have lost somebody close to them, man, it hurts and it never stops hurting, right? That doesn't go away. There's no but. It's not like, oh, this, and this, but that. No, that all that shit is real.
Yeah.
My hope for everybody is that they reach a point where when they reflect on their loved one, again, more often than not never, but more often than not, it brings a smile to their face. Because, you know, you think of a funny memory, or you look around, like I got kids now, right? And my son is my youngest. I got 2 daughters that are older. And my son carries his name, Roy. You know, that's my son's middle name. I was going to name him. First, I was going to name him after me. And I was like, no, I want him to be better than me. And then I was going to name him after my brother. I was like, those are impossible shoes to fill for a kid. You know what I mean? And so, but I want to carry that name. So that gets me to kind of the other point is, you know, I say often, not necessarily in like on YouTube channels, but anybody that knows me in person, you know, legacy, right? Or on my personal social media stuff. Right. For me, it's all legacy now. Mm-hmm. And I, you know, there was some shame in going to prison, right? Because obviously he wouldn't have wanted that for me. Right. I used to play the what if game, right? Well, what if he was alive? Then how would have this gone? And how would have that gone? But that's unfair, you know, and it's unknown. And shit, there was a time he went to juvenile hall so that I could get away with a banger, right? Like it's, you know, which is a whole nother story. But so it's not as if, oh, if we were hanging around, I would have been really good. It could have been that he winds up getting caught up for something that he didn't have coming. Who knows? And so the what if game is dangerous and unhealthy, in my opinion.
I agree.
But there's legacy still. And so, not that I'm perfect. Not that every day goes like I planned. And just because I've stayed out of prison all these years doesn't mean I've made all the right moves. But I hold on to, and I think it helps me deal with his loss in some sense. I hold on to this notion that, bro, we got legacy, right? Yeah. And the world will know your name. Like you're not gonna be. I gotta be reminded sometimes of people I know that have passed away. There's too many. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I feel bad about it sometimes. Oh man, that's right. But not him, you know? And so I'm like, I'm making moves for us. Right. And my son knows who he is. They never met, obviously, but my son knows that he carries his name. Right. And anything with Speedy on it, you know, my son loves it and they know. And so that helps me, like,
yeah,
you know?
Yeah, I can see how that would would play into that sort of, the shifting your mind, your thought process into making it about legacy and good memories. I
Yeah, and I
respect
talk about
it.
them all the time. I haven't really gotten into it on my channel. This is probably the most I've talked about it on YouTube. Because it's deeply emotional, right?
Yeah.
But I've spoken at conferences all around the country and groups of young people and older people. I mean, you name it, right? And everywhere I go, any circle that I'm in, they know, right? And I really do. I don't know how it's gonna play out, but I'm really committed to this idea of like the world's gonna know who he is somehow or another.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have it all mapped out, but in my mind, he deserves that.
Absolutely.
Right? And I will pick up the mantle to do that in a heartbeat. It's the least I could do. So
I believe you're going to make it happen for sure. I can see that. You feel very passionate about that, and I'm sure your brother is very proud. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
You mentioned going around and speaking at conferences and things, and I watched your content. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I found, to be super fascinating, but also so important is, explain to me what you call it. Actually, it's you speak on behalf of people who are maybe going through trial or something, mm-hmm. and it's like an expert witness. Is that okay?
Yeah. So I am. Traditionally, I guess kind of the shorthand of it is a gang expert, right?
Okay.
I only work for defense attorneys, and I don't, I normally don't have a lot, really never have any opinion that would be of value to prosecutors. Mm-hmm. That's what I got cops for, and so I come in, and it's a range of roles. Sometimes I testify on behalf of the defense. Sometimes, I do immigration cases as well. And so it used to be a lot of DACA cases. And then, with all the focus on Central Americans, it became a lot of asylum cases. And so, but U visas, I do it all. I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be one. In particular, when it comes to immigration law, it is insanely complicated. But I've been around a little bit, and so I'll write reports in immigration cases. I'll testify by phone all over the country in those hearings, trying to help people get their citizenship or get out of deportation proceedings or get their asylum or whatever it may be. And then in criminal cases, I do state and fed cases. The only state criminal cases I've done is in California. I was retained on one in like Chicago, but I wound up going to the hospital and I wasn't able to go out there. But and then fed cases, kind of wherever. Northerners, Southerners, blacks, whites, folks that have been in prison, folks that haven't. I don't discriminate on the cases that I cover.
Yeah.
I don't set up in any regard with anybody for any reason. And so yeah, it ranges. Sometimes I write a report, and that's enough to get charges reduced or charges dropped or a more reasonable plea bargain. Sometimes I testify on behalf of the defense. Sometimes I help the defendant or some of the defense witnesses prepare for trial, right? I help attorneys kind of go through the discovery and maybe see some stuff that they don't necessarily see. I'm well versed in the laws around gangs, but also just kind of the narratives, the traditional narratives that law enforcement use, the traditional narratives that academics use when they're working for prosecutors. And so I'll look over, like a gang officer, I'll look over their prior testimony in other cases and get an idea of what their spiel is. It's generally cookie cutter, right? So they say basically the same thing, right? And so figuring out what that is and then strategizing in terms of where are the best holes to exploit. you don't exploit everyone most of the time because there's so many holes, right? And you don't want to come across to the jury like this cop or this academic is 100% wrong on every single thing that comes out their mouth. Because that's hard, even if it is true, because that's hard for a jury to digest, right? They're trained to trust people in uniforms and trust people with degrees. So you don't want to push them too far.
Right.
You just want them to know in terms of what's relevant to this case, right? Yeah. So they'll talk about the history of the NF or the history of the MA and this and that. And that might not really be relevant to the case. So you let them have that little feel-good moment. And then you break down why this particular case isn't gang related, or this individual may be gang related, but what they did was not at the direction for the benefit of the gang or whatever. So there's a lot of angles to it, right? I don't, it's not as if every case is handled the same way.
Yeah, yeah.
There have been a couple times, not often. I've handled hundreds of cases, and I would say I could think of 2 times in which I told the prosecutor, the defense attorney, you probably don't want to put me up there. And I really don't have anything to put on paper that would help you, right? Like the case is so cut and dry or there's so much there.
Right.
Like you could put me up there, but for my own credibility, I would have to concede certain things that would not be helpful to your case. And so you decide. I'm not going to say no, but if I was you, I wouldn't put me up there, right? Yeah. Because I still got to be honest. I have a different perspective and a different view. Sure. So a lot of times my honesty is beneficial to the community.
Absolutely.
But I just can't go up there and BS, right? Because they're prosecutors and they got resources and they look at my prior testimony and they look at all that stuff and they're just dying for a chance.
Sure.
To beat me in a courtroom. And I've helped people beat murder cases. I had a Sureño in San Jose that was doing life on a murder. He came back on an appeal for different reasons. He'd been down 12 years. I didn't even testify in that case. I just worked with him as an attorney.
Okay.
And he testified. And he wound up walking out of there and he was home by the holidays. They offered him a deal of 12 years where he had time served.
Right.
And so, that's a win, right? Like you still plead out, but you're going home. You're not spending your life in prison. You're going home in a matter of days. Yeah. So every case looks a little different, but I love it. And I fell into it on a fluke. It was never an intention of mine. It was never something I thought was even possible or something that I had ever considered. But, I had a youngster that I was working with that I knew from East Palo Alto where I lived for a long time. And he caught a case and it was a BS case. And they hit him with a gang enhancement and wanted to send him to prison. And his investigator, who was a retired cop, called me. And I was like, he's not in a gang, bro. Like, well, how do you know? I know everybody in the city. I know every hood in the city. And I know this dude. I sit down with his family. We, I know him very well. And he's not in a gang. So I had to show the investigator how to prove that. Right? Which is a twist. That's not how the system's supposed to work, but I had to show how to prove that. And the attorney was really happy with it and said, hey, have you ever considered being a gang expert? And I said, I can't, man. Like I've been to prison. I've been validated as a prison gang member. I paroled that way. And he was like, nah, man, you bring something to the table. And at that point, that was 2012. So I'd been home, a fair amount of years and I'd done a lot of community work all over in that. So with people, labeled as gang members. And so, yeah, it all played out. I mean, there's more details. Folks can go back and watch the video if they want, but
yeah, I would encourage everyone to watch that. Yeah, most definitely. I felt like that's a super important position to have. We need people like you, Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you make a good point. We need more too. Like I am not the best person to handle every case that I handle. I am better than what's available, but I'm not the best, right? Like it's, I can talk about Sureño neighborhoods in LA. but I'm not a Sureño and I'm not from LA and I'm not actually that familiar with those neighborhoods. And I got to tap in with people that I'm cool with that live down there to kind of make sure that I got all my ducks lined up when I speak on stuff, so that my own credibility is intact. But I have been saying for years, excuse me, that, and you know, you can't just jump into being a gang expert because you went to prison or you ran around the hood, right? There's a process there. Sure. And there's definitely some tricks and tools and strategies to make you more effective. And I'd like to set up a training. I'm actually working with a good friend of mine, Danny Murillo from Norwalk, who is also validated in the SHU. And we're going to try to put together a training of sorts. We just got to figure out logistically how to do it. But I would love to see people from the neighborhood doing this work. I would love to see some women get into this work. You know, we need other voices, and there's plenty of work to go around. I do not want to hold this whole pie for myself. To be quite honest, I'd be happy giving the whole pie away and letting other people do it, and I could focus on other things. Right. And I do it now kind of almost out of necessity, right? Is because somebody got to do it. But that somebody doesn't have to be me. And sometimes that somebody probably shouldn't be me. And so to your viewers, man, you know, keep an eye out. And we're trying to put something together. There's another university that has a program together. I'm hearing mixed reviews on it. I think this is something that really has to be led by formerly incarcerated folks and folks that was really, really caught up in that street life, you know, one or the other or both. And that doesn't mean that has to be what the expert is, but the training on how to do this work needs to come from those that have that lived experience, but also have that knowledge of kind of best practices. There's no sense to reinvent the wheel if somebody's cruising by you, you know, just, hey, that wheel works, you know what I mean? And we're the type of people that said, I'll show you how to build the wheel in a heartbeat. I don't care. I'm not trying to be the only dude in town with a wheel, you know? So, you know, we'll see. There's a lot to it, but I would love for more people to be in this work.
Yeah, that's good that you're putting that out there. You know, I'm sure people are going to see this and be intrigued by it. I know that, you know, when I watched your video, I was. And can people retain your services? Are you available, you know, like through email if someone needs you?
To a degree. I mean, I would say just email me. You know, and I've gotten some emails around cases. My email is really simple, just joshua@thehomiehangout.com. I have an Instagram set up for the channel, which is the Homie Hangout, shockingly. Right. And so people could DM me on there and kind of go, you know, we can go from there. I'd say 99.9% of the work that I've done on criminal cases in criminal court is through a public defender, right? And so in that case, the family doesn't pay me. The county pays me. I get paid from the same pool of money as the public defender does. And different offices in different counties have different standards for how they allow somebody to be. You can't just necessarily walk into, say, Monterey County. I can't just pop up in there because you're an attorney in Monterey County and you're like, hey, I want you to be a gang expert. Right. If you're a public defender. Now, if you're a paid attorney, you can do whatever you want. But as a public defender, you know, you'd have to get permission from your department, which would then have to, you know, we'd have to figure out what the money looks like. It pays very, very well once you have a little bit of experience. It's not full-time work. I mean, if I was working 40 hours a week doing that work, I'd own several homes. But I mean, it does, you know, your time is well compensated. And so there's processes, which makes that question not the easiest to answer, but anybody can reach out to me and we'll kind of go from there. When people are paying out of their own pocket, I don't charge nearly what I charge when the state's paying me, right? Or when the feds are paying me through supported immigration stuff. Really, the feds have never paid me on an immigration case. On like a RICO indictment, I do, again, from the same pool of money that the lawyers get paid from. But in immigration, you really don't have a right to defense. And so for those families, I charge very little to do the work, because I don't want money to be an obstacle to them getting some sense of justice. And then, but if like a college, because universities will take up immigration cases sometimes. Nah, I'm gonna tax the shit out of you then. You know what I mean?
For sure.
You know, like I did one for Stanford, and I was like, no, you gonna pay.
Oh yeah,
right?
You got the money. Yeah.
And so, you know, it all varies. But yeah, tell people, you know, folks are welcome to tap in, and I can't make any promises without knowing what we're talking about, but I'll at least try to help, you know.
Okay, well, good. Your email's out there. If someone needs to get a hold of you, that's good. Yeah. You mentioned your Instagram, and I wanted to bring up, you can cook. Homie cooks.
Homie cooks. Homie cooks.
I do. I'm liking those videos. A lot of people are like, damn, you can get down in the kitchen, you know?
I'm working on it. Yeah, I'm working on it.
Most definitely. That's important. I think it's good to see a dad doing that. You know what I mean? And involving his family and making that time. So, you know, it's important memories, I think, you can make with the kids. Agree. Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of why I started kind of recording it. For one, you know, through the separation and the divorce some years back, I had people snooping my social media all the time. So I was like, I'll give you something to see. Like my kids eating, you know what I mean? But also just on a practical sense. And, you know, those days are over for the most part, but just in a practical sense of, I'm suddenly a single father of 3, and we got to eat, and I can't necessarily just take them out to eat all the time anymore. And there's nobody else here. Like, there's nobody to do the laundry. There's nobody to, you know, make sure that they bathe. There's nobody to buy their clothes. There's nobody to, so, which is fine. And I welcome it. And I know how to do that stuff, but I had to step it up when it was just me. And I'm thankful I did. It's you know, I don't have my kids as much as I would like, but when they are here, you know, we tend to cook together. I don't always post. In fact, like on Homie Hangout stuff, rarely will I post pictures or videos of them. But when they're around, we tend to do it together. And when they're not around, I just do it to feed me and my old lady, right? And I enjoy it. I like it, but I video it a lot of times, in part just to flex and kind of show off, right?
You have skills.
But also to be that encouragement. You know, dads, whether you're a single dad or in a relationship, or even just a dude, whether you got kids or not, this shit ain't that hard, man. I got an air fryer, an Instapot, I just got a little immersion blender. Like, you know, it's not rocket science.
Right.
And so you can make some really good stuff and healthy stuff. You know, I got diabetes. I got lots of health issues. And so I try to show, you know, like you can eat well and it can taste good. And you can do it yourself for a fraction of the cost of going to a restaurant. So
exactly. Yeah. I think that's great. You know, it's important to show that, like you said, a lot of men out there may not realize, like, you know, hey, you guys can get down in the kitchen with your kids and, you know, make it a special event. And I think it's really great that you're showing that and putting that out there for dads. So I commend you on that. Most definitely. I got a few rapid fire questions I want to ask you.
These are always dangerous, but okay, let's see.
Okay, let me see. Okay, favorite comedy movie. What would you say?
Favorite comedy movie?
Yeah.
I don't watch a lot of movies anymore. I like stand-up stuff. You know, like I was a big fan of Carlos Mencia, and I think he got kicked to the curb, but
yeah, he had something going on. Yeah.
Yeah, Dave Chappelle, you know, I'm a fan of, but you know, some different comedians. I don't know when's the last time, honestly, I sat down and watched a comedy.
Yeah. I like stand-up too, so I can agree with that for sure. All right, if you had to choose between a dessert, I know you have diabetes, but if you could pick pie or cake?
Pie. Okay. If it's a fruit-filled pie, off top.
Okay, that sounds good too. All right, let me see. Okay, favorite kind of weather. Do you prefer the sun or rainy days?
Like this weather, the weather that we're having in Northern California right now, I don't like it when it's 100+ degrees.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I don't like it when it's storming all the time. Or I mean, I like the rain.
Hmm.
I don't like to have to, be
Right.
outside the house doing shit out, in the rain.
Yes, yes.
But I like this where you got some days that are a little warmer,
Hmm.
some days that are a little crisper.
Yeah.
Sometimes you start off with a jacket and end up in a t-shirt, but
Mhm.
um, yeah,
I
like
agree.
fall.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. And let's see, favorite food. Is there a certain dish that you just that's your go-to?
Um, Not really. Because I stay kind of experimenting. I stay trying to do new dishes. There's
Yeah.
not a whole lot of stuff that I'll make twice.
Mhm.
Some really well done, like well made chilaquiles. I like those. Um, Mostly because I haven't figured out how to make them like that great uh, for me.
Okay.
But uh, yeah, just
Yeah,
I mean, and I eat a lot. Like I eat a lot of food, so
that's good. You switch it up, try new things. Yeah, get creative in the kitchen. That's cool. So what do you have coming up that, people can look forward to? What are your future plans in the near future here?
all right, in terms of the channel,
Yeah.
um, so I've actually spent part of this weekend lining up some interviews with folks. I have a Latino dude who is a journalist and very good friend of mine. He's from the East Coast, and he's sharp. He's from the neighborhood, and so he's a neighborhood guy, but he's not a neighborhood guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He found a path out, and it's pretty powerful in a lot of circles. And so it'll be fun to have him on and talk about some things. Uh, folks that have been incarcerated. Danny is gonna get on, and he co-founded Underground Scholars. It's a program for formerly incarcerated people in the UC system, and it's now statewide. And he's done work all over the country working on higher education. Him and I actually went back to Pelican Bay together
Wow.
to talk to college students up there just a couple of years ago. That was pretty surreal.
I was gonna
And
ask, how was that?
yeah, that was a lot. That was a lot. And I may have borrowed some stuff there from there without asking. Um,
That's
but
all right.
but so yeah. So anyways, I'm lining up a few folks in terms of interviews. Some people with channels, right? Like obviously, I'd love to have you on a channel,
Absolutely.
and I've done some stuff with Doc TV, and so
Okay.
kind of interview him. And then in terms of content stuff, I'm trying to lock down a better schedule. To be quite honest, it's a little bit of a challenge. I'm not complaining at all. It's a little bit of a challenge, the time wise and health wise, and having a kid sporadically, because I want to do like a weekly thing on anger management, which I already started,
That's
and I'd
important.
like to do a weekly thing on with mental health.
Mhm.
Um, I'd like to do Sundays. I'd like to have conversations around faith, right, from various perspectives,
Like that.
and so, but then also have other conversations, and so I don't want to pigeonhole every day where
Right.
then I have to only talk about something in that lane, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm still, it's a fairly new channel. I've been around like a month, and so I'm still trying to wiggle, but
Right.
I'm really gonna focus on getting 5 videos out a week. Starting Monday. In fact, I have one already recorded for Monday about the ceasefire program and different versions of that around the country, and why I think it's not great. And so that's already recorded, right? So that'll come out Monday, and just trying to schedule stuff. So stay tuned. I normally drop videos around 4.
Okay.
I've been doing a lot of lives lately.
Yeah, those are fun.
Yeah, they're fun.
Yeah.
But you know, they wind up being like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and there's some great stuff. There's some great conversation in those lives.
Right.
But then it's kind of hard to describe compared to a recorded video. You could say, this is the subject, this is what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And get it, you know, fairly concise. My videos are normally about 30 minutes or less. And so cover what you want to cover and move on. The lives, I may start with an idea, but they can sort of go in a lot of directions. And then, you know, obviously viewers, not a lot of folks want to watch you for an hour and a half, 2 hours in one block. And so some of that content then gets mixed, you know, and so, you know, just the logistics. I got my membership up. I think I got to click a few buttons on YouTube, but my membership stuff, you know, will be up. In fact, after this, I'll go in there and make sure. But so that's there, you know, for people that want to take that route.
Yeah.
And yeah, just try to grow, but grow
mm-hmm.
according to my agenda.
Right.
And not get sucked into, I mean, you know, right? You've been around this YouTube stuff even from before you had the channel. And so this, it can get goofy, to put it mildly, in some of the behind the scenes stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not my interest. That's not what the Homie Hangout is there for. That's not my agenda.
Right.
And while I know some folks with other channels and I have different relationships with different people, I run my own program, right? Like, and so still, you know, trying to figure out how to do this stuff, but also make sure that I maintain my integrity,
right,
with my agenda of helping others move in excellence and giving folks something that's of value to them. So
I think that's something that I also peeped in. You were able to, I don't remember exactly which live or video it was. Mm-hmm. You were able to correct some information, but the way you do it is so well spoken and eloquent that it wasn't like a, you know, drama or anything like that. Like you were very good at that. So, you know, that's so needed. Definitely. I'm not with the drama or any of that stuff either. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not my place to tell other folks how to run their channels or what kind of content. And I think we all have our own lane. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it should be, right? And there's plenty of YouTube to go around, and people are free to pick and choose what they want to watch and what they don't. And so I don't fault anybody for how they get down, even if I may not get down the same way. You know, that I don't have no control over them, and nor do I want any control over them. There is their platform. They could do as they please. Mm-hmm. I just don't want to be, you know, associated with that stuff. And because there is some overlap in viewership, sometimes then there's folks, and I don't think it's malicious, but there's folks that are now asking me questions about what's happening in other places. And so I just want to be clear with them. Look, I can't speak for why stuff happens other places. I could just speak for why things happen where I'm at, right, on my channel. And so, and I think everybody should do the same, to be quite honest.
I agree.
And so even if you're on the same vibe as somebody else, that's fine too. But you should, I think in general, people should stand on their own 2 feet. And so that's, which I guess can come across as me like kind of telling people how to do, but that's not my intention. It's just a suggestion.
Yeah. You know, no, I feel like that's actually the perfect way to wrap this up is stand on your own 2 feet, you know. Yeah. It's a great message, and it's one that needs to be told. So I would highly encourage everyone out there that watches this to subscribe to your channel, the Homie Hangout. You know, I just want to tell you that I really love the way your mind works. Like you have a way of putting things out there where it's understandable, yet it's done in such a professional way that you're a very valuable asset to have in the community. And I just appreciate you, and I applaud you for what you're doing.
Thank you. That means a lot, Jen. That means a lot. And I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you're in this space, right? And glad that you know, brought me on. I'm humbled, of course. And And yeah, and I look forward to us, you know, doing stuff in the future and
Absolutely.
you know, so but I appreciate you. And you've always been, you know, a great supporter and encourager and motivator. And so especially just starting out, man, that stuff it's helpful. You
Yeah.
know, it's encouraging. So I appreciate that.
Thank
You've
you.
helped me as well.
I appreciate that too. With that said, you guys go check out the Homie Hangout and have a blessed and beautiful weekend. Sending all my love and respect to you and everyone out there. And until next time, we'll chop it up.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
Tim. Take care.